I'm Rebecca Martinez, 34 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that success meant something entirely different than what it actually became. Standing in the gleaming lobby of St. Catherine's Medical Center last Tuesday, watching my younger sister Melissa's face drain of color as she read the bronze plaque bearing my name, was a moment that redefined everything I thought I knew about family, judgment, and the price of keeping secrets. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The plaque read, "The Rebecca Martinez Pediatric Cancer Wing, donated, with gratitude and hope." Below it, in smaller text, "In memory of all the children we couldn't save and in celebration of all those we can." Melissa stood frozen, her designer purse clutched against her chest, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. Just 20 minutes earlier, she had cornered me in the hospital cafeteria and delivered what she clearly thought was a devastating blow. "Rebecca, you need to stop pretending you're rich. It's embarrassing for the whole family. But to understand how we arrived at that moment, I need to take you back 18 months to a family gathering that changed the trajectory of our relationship forever. It was my nephew Tyler's 8th birthday party, held at my brother-in-law Kevin's expansive home in the suburbs of Phoenix. The house was everything you'd expect from a successful real estate developer: soaring ceilings, marble countertops, a backyard that looked like it belonged in a resort brochure. I had arrived in my modest Honda Accord, the same car I'd been driving for 7 years. It was reliable, paid off, and served my purposes perfectly. But next to the lineup of luxury vehicles in Kevin's driveway, his Range Rover, Melissa's BMW SUV, our parents' new Cadillac, it looked decidedly out of place. I didn't mind. Cars had never been a priority for me. My priorities lay elsewhere, in places my family couldn't see and didn't understand. The party was in full swing when I walked through the front door. Children ran through the house in elaborate superhero costumes, their laughter echoing off the cheesy, high ceilings. Adults clustered in groups, wine glasses in hand, discussing vacation plans and home renovations. I found my mother, Patricia, in the kitchen, arranging store-bought cupcakes on an expensive-looking platter. "Rebecca, honey, you made it," she said, giving me a quick hug that felt more obligatory than warm. "Melissa was wondering if you were even going to show up." I glanced around the kitchen, noting the high-end appliances and custom cabinetry. Kevin had done well for himself, and he wasn't shy about displaying his success. Neither was Melissa, for that matter. She had inherited our father's flair for showmanship, his need to be seen and acknowledged. I had apparently inherited our mother's more reserved nature, though even Mom had embraced a more luxurious lifestyle since Dad's construction company had taken off in recent years. "Of course I showed up," I replied, pulling a carefully wrapped gift from my bag. "I wouldn't. Miss Tyler's birthday." Mom examined the present, a book set I'd chosen carefully, knowing Tyler's love for adventure stories. "Oh, books," she said, her tone neutral but somehow conveying disappointment. "How educational." Before I could respond, Melissa swept into the kitchen, resplendent in what I recognized as a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and she moved with the confident stride of someone who had never questioned her place in the world. "Rebecca, there you are," she said, air-kissing me in a way that managed to avoid actually touching. "I was starting to think you couldn't afford the gas to drive over here." The comment stung, partly because it revealed how little she understood about my financial situation, and partly because it was delivered with just enough humor to make calling her out seem petty. This was Melissa's specialty, wrapping cruelty in silk, making her barbs seem like playful teasing to anyone who might be listening. "Traffic was heavy," I said simply, unwilling to engage with her provocation. She gestured toward the window, where my Honda was visible among the luxury vehicles. "Still driving that old thing, I see. Rebecca, You know, Kevin could probably get you a great deal on something newer, something more appropriate for a woman your age. Appropriate. The word hung in the air like smoke. Appropriate for whom? For what occasion? I had a sudden image of myself arriving at the hospital where I volunteered every weekend, pulling up in some gleaming status symbol while families struggled to pay for their children's treatments. The incongruity of it almost made me laugh. The car works fine, I said. It gets me where I need to go. Kevin appeared in the doorway, a beer in one hand and Tyler clinging to his other arm. What's this about cars? Rebecca, you thinking about upgrading? I know a guy who could set you up with something really nice. Maybe something in your price range? The assumption that my price range was limited wasn't explicitly stated, but it hung there nonetheless. I worked as a financial advisor at a mid-sized firm downtown, a job that seemed unremarkable to my family. What they didn't know, what I had never told them, was that I had started my own investment consulting business 3 years earlier, specializing in ethical investing for high net worth clients who wanted their money to make a positive impact. The business had grown beyond my wildest expectations. Wealthy individuals and families sought me out specifically because of my reputation for thorough research, careful planning, and absolute discretion. I helped them structure charitable giving, establish foundations, and invest in companies that aligned with their values. My client roster included tech entrepreneurs, inherited wealth families, and successful professionals who trusted me with portfolios worth tens of millions of dollars. But success in my field depended on discretion. My clients valued privacy above all else, and by extension, so did I. I lived modestly not because I had to, but because flashy displays of wealth felt antithetical to everything I believed about money's true purpose. Money was a tool, not a trophy. It was meant to be used thoughtfully, not displayed carelessly. I'm perfectly happy with my current situation, I told Kevin, shifting Tyler to my hip when he reached for me. How's the birthday boy doing? Tyler launched into an excited account of his new toys, effectively ending the conversation about cars. But I could feel Melissa watching me throughout the afternoon, her gaze calculating and somehow disapproving. During cake time, she cornered me near the dessert table. Rebecca, can I talk to you for a minute? Privately? We stepped onto the back patio, where the Arizona sun cast everything in sharp relief. The pool sparkled invitingly, and I could hear the distant hum of expensive landscaping equipment maintaining Kevin's perfect lawn. I'm worried about you, Melissa began, though her tone suggested concern was not her primary emotion. You're 34 years old, you drive a car that's falling apart, you live in that tiny apartment, and you never seem to have money for anything fun. When was the last time you went on a vacation? When was the last time you bought yourself something nice? I considered how to respond. The truth was, I had taken several vacations in the past year, but they weren't the kind Melissa would recognize as legitimate. I had spent a week in Guatemala, visiting a school that my foundation was helping to fund. I had traveled to Romania to see a medical clinic that was using equipment purchased with money I had donated anonymously. I had been to conferences in Switzerland and Singapore, meeting with other financial advisors who specialized in impact investing. But these trips weren't about leisure or luxury. They were about seeing firsthand how money could be used to solve problems, to create opportunities, to literally save lives. They filled me with a sense of purpose that no resort vacation could match. I travel when I want to, I said carefully. And I buy what I need. Melissa shook her head, her perfectly styled hair catching the sunlight. That's not what I mean, and you know it. Look at this house, Rebecca. Look at what Kevin's been able to provide for his family. Don't you want that? Don't you want to be able to give Tyler nice presents, to contribute meaningfully when we go out to dinner, to not have mom worry about whether you can afford things? The comment about contributing meaningfully hit particularly hard because it was so far from the truth. What Melissa saw as my inability to pick up expensive dinner tabs was actually my choice to direct my resources elsewhere. While she was spending Hundreds of dollars on a single meal. I was funding scholarship programs, supporting medical research, and investing in clean technology startups that could revolutionize how we address climate change. Mom doesn't need to worry about me, I said. I'm doing fine. Are you, though? Melissa pressed. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've given up. It looks like you've decided that mediocrity is good enough, and that's not the Rebecca I grew up with. You used to have ambition. You used to want things. I did want things. I wanted children to have access to life-saving medical treatments, regardless of their family's ability to pay. I wanted young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to have educational opportunities. I wanted to accelerate the development of technologies that could help solve global problems. These wants burned in me with an intensity that my sister couldn't begin to understand. But how could I explain this without revealing the extent of my financial success? How could I tell her that I had already contributed more to charitable causes in the past 3 years than most people earned in a lifetime, without sounding like I was either lying or showing off? Maybe we just want different things, I said, finally. Melissa studied my face, and I saw something shift in her expression. Pity, perhaps, or frustration, or both. Rebecca, I love you, but you're living in denial. You're pretending that not caring about success makes you superior somehow, when really it just makes you sad. The conversation was interrupted by Tyler running onto the patio, chocolate frosting smeared across his face, demanding that Aunt Rebecca come see his new bicycle. I followed him gratefully, leaving Melissa standing by the pool with her certainties intact. The rest of the party passed in a blur of forced conversations and careful smiles. I watched my family, my parents discussing their upcoming cruise, Melissa and Kevin planning a ski trip to Aspen, everyone assuming that I was excluded from such luxuries by necessity rather than choice. Their pity was almost worse than their judgment would have been. As I prepared to leave, my father, Robert, walked me to my car. He was a successful contractor who had built his business from nothing, and I had always respected his work ethic, even when I disagreed with his priorities. You know, Mija, he said, using the childhood nickname that always made me feel simultaneously loved and patronized. There's no shame in asking for help when you need it. Your mother and we've been blessed lately. Business is good. If you need a loan for a new car or help with a down payment on a better apartment, you just have to ask. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I looked at this man who had raised me, who had taught me the value of hard work and integrity, and I felt a profound sadness that he couldn't see what I had become. To him, success was visible, measurable in square footage and horsepower and designer labels. The impact I was making in the world was invisible to him because it didn't announce itself with status symbols. I appreciate that, Dad, but I'm okay. Really? He patted my shoulder with the same gentle condescension I might use with a child who insisted they could reach something clearly beyond their grasp. All right, but the offer stands. Family takes care of family. As I drove home through the desert landscape, I reflected on the strange position I found myself in. I was more financially successful than anyone in my family realized, yet they saw me as the one who needed taking care of. I was making a meaningful difference in the world, yet they viewed my choices as evidence of personal failure. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very discretion that made me valuable to my clients was creating a rift with my family. But I had built my business on trust, and that trust required confidentiality. I couldn't reveal my clients' private affairs just to improve my standing at family dinners. Moreover, there was a part of me that had grown comfortable with my family's misconceptions. Their pity was easier to bear than their potential judgment about my wealth. I had seen how money changed relationships, how it created expectations and resentments and complicated dynamics. By appearing to have less than I did, I preserved a certain simplicity in my family connections, even if that simplicity came with its own costs. But as the months passed after Tyler's birthday party, those costs began to accumulate in ways I hadn't anticipated. The comments became more frequent, more pointed. Melissa's concern evolved into something that felt more like contempt. Family gatherings became exercises in endurance, tests of how long I could smile while being patronized by people who loved me, but fundamentally misunderstood everything about my life. The breaking point came during what should have been a moment of pure joy. The announcement of my latest and largest charitable commitment, one that would establish the pediatric cancer wing that bore my name. Instead of celebration, it became the setting for the most painful confrontation I'd ever had with my sister, and the revelation that would finally force both of us to confront the truth about success, family, and the assumptions we make about the people we think we know best. The weeks following Tyler's birthday party brought an unexpected avalanche of professional opportunities. My investment consulting firm, Meridian Impact Advisors, had gained recognition within exclusive circles for delivering exceptional returns while maintaining strict ethical standards. Word traveled quietly through networks of wealth managers, family offices, and philanthropic organizations that there was a financial advisor in Phoenix who could help clients make money and make a difference simultaneously. My client roster had grown to include the founder of a renewable energy company who wanted to establish a billion-dollar climate foundation, a tech entrepreneur's widow seeking to honor her late husband through educational initiatives, and a pharmaceutical heiress determined to improve global health outcomes. Each client brought complex challenges that required innovative solutions, and I thrived on the intellectual puzzle of aligning their financial goals with their values. The pharmaceutical heiress, Catherine Blackwood, had become particularly significant to both my business and my personal mission. Her family's company had developed several breakthrough cancer medications, but she carried deep guilt about the pricing that made these treatments inaccessible to many families. Catherine had inherited substantial wealth and wanted to use it to address the very inequities her family's business had inadvertently created. "Rebecca, I need your help with something ambitious," Catherine had said during our quarterly review meeting at her Scottsdale estate. We sat in her sun-drenched conservatory, surrounded by rare orchids and the quiet luxury that came with generational wealth. "I want to fund pediatric cancer treatment programs across the Southwest. Not just research, but actual treatment access for families who can't afford it." I had been working with Catherine for 18 months, helping her restructure her portfolio to generate steady returns while divesting from industries that conflicted with her values. She trusted my judgment implicitly, partly because I had helped her increase her charitable giving capacity by 40% through strategic financial planning. "What kind of scale are we talking about?" I asked, though I suspected the answer would be substantial. $10 million to start. Maybe more if we can demonstrate real impact. I want to partner with hospitals that are already doing excellent work but lack resources. I want to fund not just treatment, but support services, family housing, transportation, counseling, the whole ecosystem that families need when their child is fighting cancer. The conversation had planted a seed that grew rapidly into an obsession. I began researching pediatric cancer treatment centers throughout Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. I studied mortality rates, treatment protocols, and most importantly, the financial barriers that prevented children from accessing potentially life-saving care. St. Catherine's Medical Center emerged as the clear leader in the region. Their pediatric oncology program had remarkable success rates, but their facilities were cramped and outdated. Families often had to travel hundreds of miles for treatment, then struggle to find affordable housing nearby. The hospital's social workers did heroic work with minimal resources, helping families navigate insurance complexities while dealing with the trauma of their child's diagnosis. I arranged a tour of the existing pediatric cancer unit, ostensibly to help Catherine evaluate potential partnerships. Dr. Sarah Chen, the department head, walked us through corridors that felt more like a 1980s office building than a modern medical facility. The treatment rooms were functional but grim, with outdated equipment and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sickly. "We're grateful for any space we can get," Dr. Chen explained, as she showed us a cramped family waiting area where parents took turns sleeping in uncomfortable chairs. "The hospital administration supports our work, but pediatric oncology doesn't generate revenue the way cardiac surgery or orthopedics do. We make do with what we have." In the children's ward, I watched nurses navigate tight spaces between beds, trying to maintain some semblance of privacy for young patients dealing with the indignity of serious illness. I saw parents who looked like they hadn't slept in weeks, holding vigil beside children who were too sick to understand why their world had suddenly become dominated by hospitals and treatments, and worried adult faces. One particular scene seared itself into my memory. A mother sat beside her daughter's bed, a girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. The woman was working on a laptop, trying to maintain some connection to her job while her child slept fitfully. She kept glancing between the screen and her daughter's face, torn between the practical necessity of earning money and the emotional imperative of being present. "That's Maria Santos," Dr. Chen said quietly. Her daughter Sophia was diagnosed with leukemia 3 months ago. Maria's a teacher from Tucson. She drives 2 hours each way for Sophia's treatments, and she's used up all her sick leave. The school district has been understanding, but she's struggling financially. I watched Maria close her laptop and take her daughter's small hand, whispering, something that made Sophia smile despite the IV tubes and monitoring wires. In that moment, I made a decision that would eventually lead to the confrontation with Melissa in the hospital lobby. After the tour, Catherine and I sat in my office discussing potential partnership structures, but my mind kept drifting to those cramped corridors, to Maria Santos splitting her attention between work and her daughter's bedside, to the nurses working miracles in facilities that didn't match their dedication. "Catherine, what if we thought bigger?" I said, interrupting her analysis of treatment outcome statistics. "What if instead of just funding treatment access, we created an entirely new facility, something purpose-built for pediatric cancer care, with family support integrated from the beginning?" Her eyes lit up with interest. "How much bigger?" I pulled out my calculator and started running numbers. Construction costs for a modern medical facility, state-of-the-art equipment, endowment funding to ensure long-term sustainability. The figure that emerged was substantial but achievable. $25 million would create something transformational, I said. A dedicated pediatric cancer wing with family housing, educational support so kids don't fall behind in school, recreational therapy spaces, everything families need to focus on healing rather than logistics. Catherine leaned back in her chair, processing the magnitude of what I was proposing. That's bigger than anything I've done before." "The impact would be proportional to the investment," I said. "We could save lives, but we could also save families from the additional trauma of financial stress and inadequate facilities." Over the following weeks, Catherine and I developed a comprehensive plan for what would become the Rebecca Martinez Pediatric Cancer Wing. The naming had been Catherine's idea. She insisted that my vision and planning deserved recognition, despite my preference for anonymity. "Rebecca, you can't hide behind my name forever," she had argued during one of our planning sessions. "You've structured this entire project, identified the need, designed the solutions. This is your legacy as much as it is mine." I had been reluctant to attach my name to such a visible philanthropic gesture. My business model depended on discretion, on being the invisible hand that helped clients achieve their charitable goals without drawing attention to myself. But Catherine was adamant, and eventually I agreed to the naming arrangement with the understanding that my role as the project architect would remain confidential. The negotiation process with St. Catherine's Medical Center took months. Hospital administrators were initially skeptical that such a large donation came with no hidden agenda. They were accustomed to gifts that came with naming requirements, board positions, or operational control. My offer was unusual in its simplicity. Fund the construction and equipment, establish an endowment for ongoing operations, and step back to let medical professionals do their work. Dr. Chen became my primary advocate within the hospital system. She understood that this wasn't about ego or publicity, but about creating the best possible environment for treating sick children. Her clinical expertise was invaluable in designing spaces that would actually improve patient outcomes rather than just looking impressive in fundraising brochures. During this period, my family remained completely unaware of the project. I maintained my routine of modest living and careful financial disclosure. I drove my Honda to family dinners, split restaurant bills proportionally, and continued to be seen as the family member who needed looking after rather than the one capable of transforming entire healthcare systems. The contrast between my public persona and private impact became increasingly surreal. I would spend morning meetings designing million-dollar treatment facilities, then attend evening family gatherings where Melissa would slip me $20 bills for gas money with the patronizing kindness of someone helping a struggling relative. My mother began making pointed comments about my lifestyle choices during our weekly phone calls. "Rebecca, I worry that you're becoming too set in your ways," she would say. "You're still young enough to make changes, to build something more substantial for yourself." If she only knew, I thought, that I was building something more substantial, then she could imagine. Not for myself exactly, but for families like Maria Santos, for children like Sophia who deserved excellent medical care regardless of their parents' financial resources. The groundbreaking ceremony was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in March. Hospital administrators, city officials, and major donors would gather to commemorate the beginning of construction. I planned to attend quietly, avoiding photographs and speeches, content to watch from the background as dirt was turned for a facility that would serve families for generations. But 3 days before the ceremony, Melissa called with news that would force everything into the open. Tyler had been experiencing persistent fatigue and unexplained bruising. Kevin had finally convinced Melissa to take him to their pediatrician, who had immediately referred them to a pediatric oncologist. "They want to run more tests," Melissa said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Blood work, bone marrow biopsy. Rebecca, they're talking about leukemia." The word hung between us like a physical presence. Leukemia. The same diagnosis that had brought Sophia Santos and her mother to those cramped treatment rooms at St. Catherine's Medical Center. "Which hospital are they sending you to?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "St. Catherine's. They have the best pediatric cancer program in the state, apparently. We're supposed to go in tomorrow morning to meet with the oncologist." I closed my eyes, seeing the cramped corridors and inadequate family spaces that Tyler might soon occupy. But then I remembered the architectural plans spread across my dining room table, the detailed specifications for family-centered care that would transform the experience for children like my nephew. "Melissa, I need to tell you something important," I said. "But not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere tonight?" We arranged to meet at a quiet restaurant near her house, neutral territory where we could talk without interruption. As I prepared for the conversation that would finally reveal the truth about my financial situation and philanthropic work, I realized that everything was about to change between us. The secret I had guarded so carefully was about to become irrelevant. My nephew's potential illness had made the abstract personal, the theoretical immediate. Tomorrow, Melissa would walk into St. Catherine's Medical Center as the worried parent of a sick child, and within weeks, she might discover that the new wing being built to help families like ours bore the name of the sister she had been pitying for all these months. The restaurant Melissa had chosen was one of those upscale establishments where conversation happened in hushed tones, and the lighting was designed to make everyone look younger and more attractive. I arrived early, selecting a corner booth that would provide privacy for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. As I waited, I rehearsed various ways to explain the truth about my life without sounding defensive or condescending. "Melissa, arrived 15 minutes late, her usual punctuality abandoned in favor of what I could only assume was deliberate power positioning. She looked impeccable despite the stress of Tyler's medical concerns. Her hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, designer outfit coordinated down to her handbag. But I could see the tension in the way she gripped her purse, the slight tremor in her hands as she adjusted her napkin. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Kevin's at home with Tyler, and I had to give him detailed instructions about symptoms to watch for. The doctor said if Tyler develops a fever or starts vomiting, we need to take him to the emergency room immediately." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of shared family love despite our complicated relationship. "How are you holding up?" "I'm terrified," she admitted, her carefully constructed composure cracking slightly. "Rebecca, what if it's cancer? What if my baby has to go through chemotherapy and radiation and all those horrible treatments? What if we lose him?" The raw fear in her voice transported me back to the pediatric ward at St. Catherine's, to all the families I had observed grappling with the same devastating possibilities. But now it wasn't abstract. It was Tyler, the little boy who called me Aunt Becca and insisted I push him higher on the swings at the park. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," I said gently. "The tests might show something completely manageable. But Melissa, even if it is serious, Tyler will get excellent care at St. Catherine's. They have one of the best pediatric oncology programs in the country." She nodded, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. "The oncologist we're seeing tomorrow, Dr. Chen, apparently she's supposed to be amazing. But Rebecca, what if insurance doesn't cover everything? What if we need treatments that aren't approved yet? Kevin's business is doing well, but medical bills can be astronomical." This was my opening, the natural transition into the conversation I had been planning. But looking at my sister's frightened face, I realized that revealing my wealth and philanthropic activities at this moment might seem like I was trying to make her crisis about me. Instead, I chose a different approach. "Melissa, before we talk about Tyler's situation, I need to tell you some things about my life that I've kept private. Things that might change how you see me and how our family functions." She looked puzzled, clearly expecting this conversation to focus on Tyler's medical needs. "What kind of things?" I took a deep breath, feeling like I was about to step off a cliff. "I'm not the person you think I am. The struggling, barely getting by version of Rebecca that you've been worrying about? She doesn't exist. She never existed." Melissa stared at me blankly. "I don't understand what you mean." "I mean that I'm financially successful. Very successful. More successful than Dad, more successful than Kevin, more successful than you've ever imagined possible." Her expression shifted from confusion to skepticism. "Rebecca, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this isn't the time for false bravado. Tyler might have cancer and I need to focus on real solutions, not fantasy." "It's not fantasy," I said, pulling out my phone and accessing my banking app. I turned the screen toward her, showing the balance in just one of my business accounts. "This is real!" Melissa stared at the number, blinking several times as if trying to clear her vision. That can't be right. That's more money than Kevin and I made last year, combined." "That's one account, Melissa. I have others. I have investment portfolios, business assets, real estate holdings. I've been managing money for some of the wealthiest families in the Southwest for the past 4 years, and my firm has grown beyond anything I initially imagined." She set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. "But you drive that old Honda. You live in that tiny apartment. You never buy anything expensive. You never go anywhere fancy. You split dinner bills down to the penny." "Because none of those things matter to me," I explained. "Cars are transportation. Apartments are shelter. Expensive dinners are just food, in prettier restaurants. I don't need external validation of my success, and I don't need status symbols to feel good about myself." Melissa leaned back in the booth, studying my face as if seeing me for the first time. "So when Mom and Dad offered to help you with a car loan, when Kevin suggested you needed financial assistance, when I've been slipping you money for gas. You were all trying to help someone who didn't need help, I confirmed. Someone who has been anonymously donating more money to charitable causes each year than most people earn in their entire careers. The silence stretched between us, filled with the quiet conversations of other diners and the soft background music that was supposed to create ambiance. I could see Melissa processing this information, recalibrating everything she thought she knew about our family dynamics. Why? She finally asked. Why keep it secret? Why let us think you were struggling? This was the question I had been dreading, partly because I wasn't sure I understood my own motivations entirely. Multiple reasons, I said slowly. My business depends on discretion. My clients trust me with extremely sensitive financial information, and they need to know I can keep secrets. If I'm broadcasting my personal success, how can they trust me to protect their privacy? Melissa nodded slowly, though I could see she wasn't entirely satisfied with this explanation. But there's more, I continued. I've seen how money changes family relationships. I've watched wealthy clients whose families treat them like ATM machines, whose every conversation becomes about what they can provide rather than who they are as people. I wanted to preserve the authenticity of our relationships. Authenticity? Melissa's voice carried a sharp edge. Rebecca, I've spent months feeling sorry for you. I've worried about your future, felt guilty about my own success, tried to figure out ways to help you without damaging your pride. How is any of that authentic? The accusation stung because it contained truth. My deception had created its own distortions, its own artificial dynamics. You're right, I admitted. I made decisions that seemed protective at the time, but they created other problems. I let you worry unnecessarily, and I let myself become resentful about being pitied when I could have simply been honest. Resentful, she repeated. Is that what you've been feeling? Resentment toward me? Toward all of us? I considered the question carefully. Sometimes, yes. It was frustrating to be seen as the family member who needed taking care of when I was actually in a position to help others. It was painful to have my choices interpreted as evidence of failure, rather than conscious decisions about how I wanted to live. Melissa signaled the waiter for another glass of wine, clearly needing time to process everything I had revealed. When she looked at me again, her expression had shifted from confusion to something that might have been hurt. What else haven't you told us, Rebecca? What other secrets are you keeping? This was the moment I had been building toward. The revelation that would make Tyler's medical situation personal in ways Melissa couldn't yet imagine. I've been working on a major philanthropic project for the past 8 months, a project that will directly impact Tyler's treatment if he needs it. What kind of project? I've funded the construction of a new pediatric cancer wing at St. Catherine's Medical Center. It's going to be a state-of-the-art facility designed specifically for children and their families. Family housing, educational support, recreational, therapy, everything that makes treatment more bearable. Melissa stared at me in silence for what felt like several minutes. You funded it? As in, you paid for it? $25 million, I confirmed. In partnership with one of my clients, but the majority of the funding came from me. The wing is scheduled to open in 18 months, and it will serve families throughout the Southwest. $25 million, she repeated, as if testing how the words sounded. Rebecca, that's more money than I can even conceptualize. It's money that will save lives, I said simply. And if Tyler does have cancer, he'll benefit from facilities that were designed with his needs in mind. The waiter approached our table to take our order, but Melissa waved him away without looking up. She was staring at her hands, processing the magnitude of what I had just revealed. The wing, she said slowly. Does it have a name? I felt heat rise in my cheeks. The Rebecca Martinez Pediatric Cancer Wing. Your name is going on a hospital wing. Your name is going to be on a plaque that sick children and their families see every day for the next 50 years. It wasn't my idea, I said quickly. My client insisted on the naming arrangement. I would have preferred to remain anonymous. Melissa looked up at me, and I saw something in her expression that I couldn't immediately identify. So tomorrow, when I take Tyler to meet with Dr. Chen, when we walk through the hospital trying to figure out how to handle the worst possible news, we might see signs advertising the Rebecca Martinez Pediatric Cancer Wing? The construction hasn't started yet, I said. But yes, there will be announcements, fundraising materials, recognition signage. And you are going to tell me this when, exactly? When Tyler was sick in a hospital bed, and I suddenly discovered that my sister, the sister I've been treating like a charity case, had donated enough money to fund an entire medical facility. The pain in her voice was unmistakable now, and I realized that my careful secret-keeping had created a situation where my sister might discover my philanthropic work at the most emotionally vulnerable moment of her life. I was going to tell you. Tonight, I said. That's why I called you, why I asked you to meet me. I realized that with Tyler's situation, everything was about to come out anyway, and I wanted you to hear it from me first. Convenient timing, she said bitterly, right when keeping the secret became impossible. I couldn't argue with her assessment, because it was accurate. I had been content to maintain my deception until circumstances made it untenable. You're right. I should have told you sooner. I should have told all of you sooner. Melissa finished her wine in 2 large gulps, then looked directly at me. Rebecca, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Of course. When? You watch me worry about Tyler's medical bills, when you see me stressed about insurance coverage and treatment costs. Are you planning to offer help? Or are you going to maintain this charade where we pretend you can't afford to contribute? Question forced me to confront the practical implications of my revelation. Tyler's potential illness had made my financial resources relevant to my family's well-being in ways I hadn't fully considered. I want to help however I can, I said carefully. But I also don't want to create a dynamic where I'm solving problems with money instead of being present as Tyler's aunt and your sister. Those aren't mutually exclusive options, Melissa pointed out. You can write a check and still show up emotionally. She was right, of course, but her words highlighted the complexity of navigating family relationships when financial resources were dramatically unequal. How could I offer help without seeming condescending? How could I maintain normal, familial bonds when I had the power to solve problems that would devastate other families? I'll figure it out as we go, I said finally. Right now, let's focus on getting Tyler the best possible care and dealing with whatever his diagnosis reveals. Melissa stood up abruptly. I need to go home. Kevin's waiting for updates, and I need to process everything you've told me before. We see Dr. Chen tomorrow. As she gathered her purse and coat, I felt the weight of irreversible change settling over our relationship. Tomorrow would bring Tyler's test results and the beginning of whatever medical journey lay ahead. But tonight had already transformed the fundamental dynamics of our family, exposing secrets that would require us to rebuild our connections from the ground up. The morning of Tyler's appointment arrived gray and overcast, with spring clouds, gathering over the Phoenix Valley like a visual representation of the anxiety permeating our family. I had barely slept, my mind cycling between worst-case scenarios and the complex emotional landscape that my revelations to Melissa had created. By 6 a.m., I was dressed and pacing my apartment, checking my phone every few minutes for updates. Kevin had texted the family group chat at dawn. Leaving for hospital at 8. Tyler is feeling okay this morning. We'll update after we meet with Dr. Chen. The message was characteristically brief, but I could sense the controlled tension behind his usual economy of words. I arrived at St. Catherine's Medical Center 45 minutes before Tyler's scheduled appointment, ostensibly to provide moral support, but actually because I needed to see how my sister would react to the physical environment where my philanthropic work was becoming visible. Construction barriers had been erected around the future site of the pediatric cancer wing, and large signs announced the upcoming groundbreaking ceremony. The main lobby buzzed with typical hospital activity, medical staff moving purposefully. Between departments, families consulting directories and maps, volunteers offering directions and comfort. I positioned myself near the information desk where I could observe the entrance while remaining inconspicuous. Melissa, Kevin, and Tyler arrived precisely on time, a picture of family unity despite the stress they were undoubtedly feeling. Tyler looked smaller than usual in his favorite superhero t-shirt, but he was animated, asking questions about the large fish tank in the lobby and pointing out interesting architectural details with the curiosity of a healthy 8-year-old. Kevin carried a folder thick with medical records and insurance documentation, while Melissa had her phone out, presumably documenting everything for future reference. She moved with the hyper-organization of someone trying to maintain control in an uncontrollable situation. I approached them cautiously, unsure how Melissa would receive my presence after our conversation the previous evening. "How's everyone doing this morning?" "Aunt Becca." Tyler launched himself at me with his usual enthusiasm, apparently unaware that his parents were worried about anything more serious than a routine doctor visit. "Mom said you might come to the hospital with us. Are you going to see Dr. Chen?" "Too?" "I'm just here to support your mom and dad," I said, ruffling his hair. "How are you feeling, buddy?" "Fine," he shrugged with 8-year-old nonchalance. "Just tired sometimes. Dad says the doctor is going to do some tests to make sure I'm growing properly." Kevin and I exchanged a look over Tyler's head. They had clearly chosen to present this appointment as routine rather than alarming, which struck me as wise parenting, given Tyler's age and the uncertainty of his diagnosis. "Rebecca." Melissa acknowledged me with careful neutrality. "Thank you for coming." Her tone was polite but distant, a marked contrast to her usual warmth. I could see Kevin noting the tension between us, his expression questioning but tactful, enough not to probe in Tyler's presence. We made our way to the pediatric oncology department, following signs through corridors that I now knew intimately from my planning sessions with Dr. Chen. The waiting area was exactly as I remembered, cramped, outdated, with mismatched furniture that had clearly been accumulated over years rather than chosen as part of a cohesive design plan. Several families occupied the available seating, their situations ranging from routine follow-ups to obvious crisis management. I observed parents who looked like they hadn't left the hospital in days, children in various stages of treatment, siblings trying to entertain themselves with worn toys and outdated magazines. Tyler settled into a corner with a handheld gaming device, content to wait as long as necessary. Kevin reviewed paperwork while Melissa studied every family in the waiting room with the intensity of someone trying to prepare for her worst fears. "It's not very cheerful, is it?" she murmured too. Me gesturing around the space. "No," I agreed. "It serves its purpose, but it wasn't designed with family comfort in mind." She looked at me sharply, clearly remembering my revelation about funding a new facility. "I suppose the new wing will be different." "Completely different," I confirmed. "Family-centered design, natural lighting, comfortable spaces for extended stays, recreational areas for siblings. Everything that's missing here." Kevin looked up from his paperwork. "New wing." Melissa and I exchanged a glance, and I realized that she hadn't shared my revelations with her husband yet. "There's going to be a major expansion of the pediatric cancer program," I said carefully. "New facilities, better family support services." "That's great," Kevin said absently, returning to his insurance forms. "This place could definitely use some updating." Before Melissa could respond, a nurse called Tyler's name. We gathered our belongings and followed her through the maze of treatment rooms to Dr. Chen's office, a cramped space that managed to feel both clinical and welcoming through her personal touches. Children's artwork, family photos, a small collection of plants that somehow thrived under fluorescent lighting. Dr. Chen greeted us with the warm professionalism I remembered from our planning meetings, though she showed no sign of recognizing me. "Tyler, I'm Dr. Chen. I hear you've been feeling tired lately." What followed was a thorough medical interview, with Dr. Chen asking detailed questions about Tyler's symptoms, energy levels, and general health while conducting a preliminary physical examination. Tyler cooperated with good-natured patience, answering questions about his sleep patterns and appetite, while allowing Dr. Chen to check his lymph nodes and examine the bruising on his legs. "Based on what I'm seeing and what you've described, I'd like to run some blood tests," Dr. Chen explained to Kevin and Melissa. "We'll be looking at his complete blood count, checking for any abnormalities that might explain the fatigue and bruising." "What kind of abnormalities?" Melissa asked, her voice carefully controlled. Dr. Chen chose her words carefully. "We want to rule out various possibilities: anemia, vitamin deficiencies, infections that might be affecting his energy levels. The blood work will give us a clearer picture of what we're dealing with." I could see Melissa processing the unspoken possibilities, the diagnoses that Dr. Chen wasn't mentioning in Tyler's presence, but that hung in the air nonetheless. Kevin reached for Melissa's hand, a gesture of support that made my heart ache for what they might be facing. The blood draw took place in a small procedure room, with Tyler maintaining his brave demeanor despite obvious discomfort. The technician was skilled and efficient, but I watched my nephew's face during the process and saw shadows of fear that his cheerful chatter couldn't entirely mask. "When will we get the results?" Kevin asked as we returned to Dr. Chen's office. "The basic blood panel will be ready this afternoon," she replied. "If we need more specialized testing, that could take several days. I'll call you as soon as I have information." As we prepared to leave, Dr. Chen handed Melissa a folder of information about the hospital's support services, financial assistance programs, and family resources. "I hope we won't need most of this," she said gently. "But I like families to have comprehensive information regardless of what the tests show." Walking back through the hospital corridors, I found myself seeing everything through new eyes, not as the philanthropist who was funding improvements, but as Tyler's aunt, potentially facing months or years of treatment in these inadequate facilities. In the parking garage, Kevin loaded Tyler into their car while Melissa and I stood awkwardly beside my Honda. "How long before the new wing opens?" she asked abruptly. 18 months, assuming construction stays on schedule," I replied. She calculated silently. "So if Tyler needs treatment, he'll be stuck with these facilities." "The current facilities provide excellent medical care," I said carefully. "Dr. Chen and her team are outstanding. The physical environment isn't ideal, but the treatment outcomes are among the best in the country." "But you're spending $25 million to improve the physical environment, which suggests it matters." I couldn't argue with her logic. "Yes, it matters. Family stress affects patient outcomes. Comfortable environments promote healing. Better facilities make difficult situations marginally more bearable." Melissa leaned against her BMW suddenly, looking exhausted. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." "Of course. If Tyler has cancer, if he needs extended treatment, will you pay for everything we can't afford? Or are you going to make us struggle while you sit on millions of dollars?" The question was blunt, but fair, cutting directly to the practical implications. "Of my wealth in the context of Tyler's potential illness. I will make sure Tyler gets every possible treatment regardless of cost," I said without hesitation. "And how will that work exactly? Do you write a check to the hospital? Do you anonymously pay our bills? Do you set up some kind of trust fund?" I realized she was asking about logistics, not just reassurance. "However, you're most comfortable handling it. I can work directly with the hospital's financial team. I can provide funding through a family foundation, or I can simply cover costs as they arise. Whatever preserves your dignity and autonomy while ensuring Tyler gets optimal care." Kevin had finished securing Tyler in his car seat and approached us. "Everything okay? You both look serious." Melissa glanced at me, clearly wondering whether to involve her husband in our conversation about my financial resources. "We're just talking about next steps, depending on what the blood work shows." "Right," Kevin said, though his expression suggested he sensed undercurrents he didn't fully understand. "Tyler's asking if Aunt Becca can come over for dinner tonight. I told him we'd see how everyone feels after we get the test results." "I'd love to have dinner with Tyler," I said, meaning it completely. "Whatever the results show, we'll handle it together as a family." As they drove away, I remained in the parking garage, processing the morning's events and the conversations that would inevitably follow. The blood test results would arrive that afternoon, potentially changing everything for our family, and regardless of what those results revealed, my relationship with Melissa had been fundamentally altered by secrets that were now exposed and consequences that were only beginning to unfold. I drove home through Phoenix traffic, thinking about Tyler's brave smile during the blood draw and wondering how many other families were facing similar fears in similarly inadequate facilities. The irony wasn't lost on me that my nephew might become a patient in the very system I was working to improve, that my philanthropy had become personally relevant in ways I had never anticipated. That afternoon, as I waited for news about Tyler's test results, I found myself hoping desperately that my charitable work would remain abstract for our family, that the Rebecca Martinez Pediatric Cancer Wing would serve other people's children, not my own nephew. But I also knew that if Tyler did need the services I was funding, every dollar I had spent would feel justified in ways that no amount of abstract social good could match. The call came at 3:47 p.m. while I was attempting to focus on quarterly portfolio reviews for my client Catherine Blackwood. Dr. Chen's voice carried the measured tone that medical professionals use when delivering news that will fundamentally alter a family's trajectory. "I'd like you all to come in tomorrow morning to discuss Tyler's test results," she said to Melissa, who had immediately put the call on speaker so Kevin could listen. "There are some findings we need to review together. Can't you tell us over the phone?" Kevin asked, his contractor's practicality seeking efficiency even in crisis. "I prefer to discuss complex medical information in person," Dr. Chen replied diplomatically. "That way we can take time with your questions and talk through next steps." The subtext was clear to anyone who had experience with serious illness. Good news travels by phone. Bad news requires face-to-face conversations with visual aids, treatment options, and immediate access to support services. After Melissa ended the call, the family group text thread exploded with messages. Our parents wanted to know what the doctor had said. Melissa's close friends offered to help with Tyler's care, and various relatives emerged from months of casual contact to express concern and support. I drove to Melissa and Kevin's house that evening, bringing takeout from Tyler's favorite restaurant and a selection of age-appropriate books about medical procedures and hospital stays. I wasn't sure whether these resources would prove necessary, but I wanted to be prepared for any conversation that might arise. Tyler greeted me at the front door with his typical enthusiasm, apparently unaware that his parents had spent the afternoon researching pediatric oncology outcomes and treatment protocols. "Aunt Becca, look what I built!" He dragged me to the living room where an elaborate Lego construction covered most of the coffee table. "That's incredible, buddy," I said, examining his architectural achievement while Kevin and Melissa watched from the kitchen doorway. They both looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep fatigue that comes from emotional stress rather than physical exertion. During dinner, we carefully maintained normal conversation: Tyler's upcoming school science fair, Kevin's latest construction project, weekend plans that might or might not need to be canceled depending on tomorrow's news. But underneath the surface normalcy, I could feel the tension thrumming like an electrical current. After Tyler was settled in front of a movie, the three adults gravitated to the kitchen where honest conversation could occur without 8-year-old ears overhearing potentially frightening information. "I've been doing research," Kevin announced, opening his laptop to reveal browser tabs covering pediatric leukemia, childhood cancer survival rates, and treatment facility rankings. If Tyler has what I think he has, we need to understand our options. Melissa sat beside him, her own research materials spread across the kitchen island. I've been looking at insurance coverage, out-of-network specialists, experimental treatments. Kevin, some of these therapies cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Insurance will cover most standard treatments, Kevin said, though his voice carried uncertainty. And if it doesn't, we'll figure something out. We'll mortgage the house, borrow against my business, whatever it takes. I watched this conversation unfold, seeing my brother-in-law contemplate financial strategies that would devastate his family's stability, while I sat with enough liquid assets to fund Tyler's treatment multiple times over. The disconnect felt surreal and morally complicated. You won't need to mortgage anything, I said quietly. Both Kevin and Melissa looked at me, and I saw the moment when Kevin began to understand that yesterday's family dynamics had shifted in ways he didn't yet comprehend. What does that mean exactly? He asked. Melissa glanced at me, clearly wondering how much to reveal. Kevin, Rebecca told me something yesterday that changes our situation significantly. What kind of something? I decided directness was preferable to prolonged explanation. I'm wealthy, Kevin, substantially wealthy. If Tyler needs medical treatment that insurance doesn't cover, I can pay for it without affecting my lifestyle or financial security. Kevin stared at me for several long moments. Wealthy how? Like, you have some savings, or wealthy like, I could pay cash for your house and not notice the expense, I said bluntly. He looked around his expensive kitchen, calculating the implications of what I had just revealed. Rebecca, this house cost us $800,000. I understand. And you're saying you could buy it with pocket change. I'm saying money will not be a factor in Tyler's treatment, whatever that treatment requires. Kevin leaned back in his chair, processing this information with the methodical approach he brought to complex construction problems. How long have you been wealthy? Several years. My investment consulting business has grown considerably since I started it. And you never mentioned this because, Melissa answered before I could respond. Because she wanted to maintain authentic family relationships. Because she didn't want us to treat her differently. Well, mission accomplished, Kevin said dryly. I've been worrying about your financial situation for years. I've offered to help you find better paying jobs, suggested you might want to move in with mom and dad to save money, felt guilty about our success while you seemed to be struggling. The pain in his voice was genuine, and I realized that my deception had affected more people than just Melissa. Kevin had lost sleep worrying about my well-being, had made family decisions based on incorrect information about my needs and resources. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it completely. I never intended for my privacy to create stress for you. Privacy, Kevin repeated. Is that what we're calling it? Kevin, Melissa interjected. We can address the deception later. Right now, we need to focus on Tyler. Right, he said, visibly refocusing on immediate priorities. So if Tyler needs treatment, if he needs specialists or experimental therapies or long-term care, you can cover whatever insurance doesn't? Yes, without question. And this won't create financial hardship for you? None whatsoever. Kevin stood up and walked to the window overlooking his backyard, where Tyler's swing set and soccer goals represented the normal childhood that might be interrupted by months of medical treatment. Rebecca, I need you to understand something. I'm grateful for this safety net, more grateful than I can express. But I'm also angry that you let us worry unnecessarily, and I'm confused about why you chose to reveal this now. Tyler's situation made the secret unsustainable, I admitted. And there's something else you should know. Kevin turned back toward the kitchen table. More surprises? I've been funding a major expansion of the pediatric oncology program at St. Catherine's, A new wing designed specifically for children with cancer and their families. If Tyler needs extended treatment, he'll benefit from facilities that I helped design. You funded a hospital wing, Kevin said slowly. Like, you paid for construction? $25 million, Melissa supplied. Kevin sat down heavily. Jesus Christ, Rebecca, you're not just wealthy, you're like philanthropist wealthy, you're like Carnegie Library wealthy. The naming ceremony is next week, I continued. The Rebecca Martinez Pediatric Cancer Wing will be announced publicly, which means anyone who pays attention to local news will know about my charitable activities. So tomorrow, when we go to discuss Tyler's diagnosis, we might discover that his aunt secretly funded the building where he'll receive treatment, Kevin summarized. That's possible, yes. Kevin looked at his wife, then back at me. Melissa, did you know about the hospital wing when we were there this morning? Rebecca told me last night. All of it. The money, the business success, the charitable work. And you didn't think I should know this before we went to the hospital. I was processing it myself, Melissa said defensively. I needed time to understand what it meant for our family. What it meant, Kevin repeated, is that we walked into that hospital worrying about medical bills and insurance coverage, while Tyler's aunt had already ensured he'd get the best possible care regardless of cost. That seems like relevant information for parents facing their child's potential cancer diagnosis. The tension in the room was escalating, and I realized that my revelation had created new conflicts at the worst possible time. I take full responsibility for the timing and the way I handled this, I said. But right now, the most important thing is getting through tomorrow's appointment and whatever follows. Agreed, Melissa said firmly. Kevin, we can work through our feelings about Rebecca's choices after we know what we're dealing with medically, Verify. Nodded reluctantly. But Rebecca, I need you to promise me something. No more secrets that affect this family. If there's anything else we need to know about your resources, your connections, your plans, tell us now. I considered what other information might become relevant. My business partner, Catherine Blackwood, is the primary investor in several pharmaceutical companies that develop cancer treatments. If Tyler needs access to experimental therapies or clinical trials, I can facilitate those connections. Of course you can, Kevin said, shaking his head. Is there anything you can't do with your mystery fortune? I can't guarantee outcomes, I said quietly. I can ensure Tyler gets the best possible care, but I can't promise that care will be successful. Money solves logistical problems, not medical ones. The sobering reality of my limitations settled over our conversation. Wealth could provide access, comfort, and options, but it couldn't change the fundamental uncertainty of serious illness or guarantee the outcomes we all desperately wanted. Tyler appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing his eyes sleepily. Mom, can I have some water? And will you read me a story? Of course, sweetheart, Melissa said, immediately shifting into maternal mode. Aunt Becca and Dad are going to clean up the kitchen while I get you ready for bed. As Melissa led Tyler upstairs, Kevin and I worked in companionable silence, loading the dishwasher and wiping down counters while processing the day's revelations and tomorrow's uncertainties. Rebecca, Kevin said as we finished cleaning, I want you to know that I'm grateful. Whatever Tyler needs, knowing that money won't be an obstacle takes away one huge source of stress. I'm glad I can help. But I also want you to understand that this changes everything between us. Not just the financial stuff, but the trust issues. It's going to take time for me to reconcile the Rebecca we thought we knew with the person you actually are. I understand, I said. And Kevin, I want you to know that every decision I make going forward will prioritize Tyler's well-being above everything else, including my own privacy preferences. He nodded, apparently satisfied with this commitment. Tomorrow's going to be difficult regardless of what Dr. Chen tells us. But at least now, we're going in with all the information. As I drove home through the Phoenix evening, I reflected on how quickly family dynamics could transform under pressure. Tomorrow's appointment would bring Tyler's diagnosis and the beginning of whatever medical journey lay ahead. But tonight had already fundamentally altered the relationships that would carry us through that journey, replacing comfortable deceptions with uncomfortable truths that might ultimately prove more valuable than any amount of money I could contribute to his care. The morning of Tyler's follow-up appointment arrived with unusual clarity. Brilliant Arizona sunshine that seemed inappropriate for what we all suspected would be life-altering news. I met Melissa, Kevin, and Tyler in the hospital parking garage, where my nephew bounded out of their BMW with the resilience that only children possess when facing uncertainty. "Aunt Becca, look." Tyler held up a small notebook decorated with superhero stickers. "I'm going to write down everything Dr. Chen says so I can remember it later." "That's very smart, buddy," I said, my heart breaking at his earnest preparation for news that might change everything about his young life. We walked through the hospital entrance together, past the information desk where I had waited nervously just 2 days earlier. But this time, something was different. Near the main corridor leading to the pediatric wing, a large poster displayed architectural renderings of the future Rebecca Martinez Pediatric Cancer Wing, complete with details about family amenities, treatment innovations, and the projected opening date. Melissa stopped walking abruptly when she saw the display. Kevin nearly collided with her, then followed her gaze to the poster bearing my name in elegant lettering across the top. "That's you," Kevin said quietly, as if seeing the visual representation made my philanthropic work suddenly real. Tyler studied the poster with 8-year-old curiosity. "Aunt Becca, why is your name on that picture?" Before I could formulate an age-appropriate explanation, an elderly volunteer approached our group. "Exciting, isn't it?" she said cheerfully. "The new wing is going to transform pediatric care at this hospital. Miss Martinez must be incredibly generous to fund such an ambitious project." "She is," Kevin said, looking directly at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. We continued toward the pediatric oncology department, passing several more displays announcing the upcoming groundbreaking ceremony and highlighting the features that would distinguish the new facility. With each poster, I felt increasingly exposed, as if my careful privacy was dissolving in real time. Dr. Chen's waiting room seemed more cramped than ever, filled with families at various stages of their medical journeys. Tyler found a chair and opened his superhero notebook, ready to document whatever news awaited us. Kevin and Melissa sat close together, their hands intertwined in the universal gesture of couples facing crisis together. "Tyler Martinez," the nurse called, and we gathered our belongings for what would prove to be one of the most important conversations of our family's history. Dr. Chen's office felt different this morning, somehow both more clinical and more welcoming. She had arranged chairs so that Tyler would be included in the discussion, while still allowing space for adult conversation when necessary. "Tyler, I'm impressed by your notebook," Dr. Chen began, establishing rapport with her young patient before delivering news that would affect the entire family. "Are you ready to hear about your blood tests?" Tyler nodded solemnly, pen poised, over a fresh page. "The good news is that you don't have leukemia," Dr. Chen said directly, and I watched tension drain from Kevin and Melissa's faces like water from a broken dam. "I don't have cancer?" Tyler asked, seeking clarification in language he understood. "You don't have cancer," Dr. Chen confirmed. "What you do have is a condition called iron deficiency anemia, which explains your tiredness and the bruising we've been concerned about." "Is that serious?" Melissa asked, her voice carefully controlled despite the relief that was evident in her posture. "It's very treatable," Dr. Chen assured her. "Iron supplements, dietary changes, and some follow-up testing to determine why Tyler became anemic in the first place. Most likely it's related to his recent growth spurt and some dietary preferences that are common in children his age." Tyler wrote diligently in his notebook, while Dr. Chen explained treatment protocols and follow-up schedules. The conversation that had seemed destined to derail our family's normalcy instead became a routine discussion of nutrition and vitamin supplements. As we prepared to leave, Dr. Chen addressed the adults separately, while Tyler examined fish in the waiting room aquarium. I want you to know that your concern was completely appropriate given Tyler's symptoms. Many parents in your situation would have feared the same possibilities. Thank you for being so thorough, Kevin said, shaking Dr. Chen's hand with the fervor of a man whose worst fears had been averted. Walking back through the hospital corridors, Tyler skipped between us, already planning how he would tell his friends about his special vitamins, an important doctor visit. The architectural posters for the Rebecca Martinez Pediatric Cancer Wing took on different significance now. Not personal necessity, but community contribution. Near the main entrance, we encountered a group of construction workers reviewing blueprints for the upcoming groundbreaking. One of them, wearing a hard hat labeled Phoenix General Contracting, looked up as we passed. "Kevin Martinez?" the man called out. "I thought that was you." Kevin stopped, recognizing someone from his professional network. "Jake Morrison, right? We worked together on the Desert Ridge project." "That's right. Hey, are you here for the pediatric wing groundbreaking prep? I heard your company might be bidding on some of the specialty work." "Actually, we were here for a family medical appointment," Kevin replied. "But my sister-in-law is—" He gestured toward the poster displaying my name. Jake's eyes widened. "Rebecca Martinez is your sister-in-law? Man, she's becoming legendary in philanthropic circles. $25 million for a pediatric facility. That's Carnegie-level generosity." "She's full of surprises," Kevin said dryly. As we continued toward the parking garage, Tyler tugged on my sleeve. "Aunt Becca, are you famous?" "Not famous, buddy. Just someone who wants to help sick children get better." "Like me?" Tyler asked innocently. "You're not sick anymore," I reminded him. "But yes, like you would have been if Dr. Chen had found something more serious." In the parking garage, after Kevin had secured Tyler in his car seat, Melissa approached, me with an expression that combined relief, gratitude, and lingering complexity. "Rebecca, I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "For what?" "For the comment about pretending to be rich. For all the assumptions I made about your choices, your lifestyle, your priorities. I've been condescending and judgmental about things I didn't understand." I considered her words carefully. "We both made mistakes, Melissa. I should have been honest about my situation years ago." "Why weren't you?" she asked. "I mean, I understand the business discretion aspect, but there's more to it than that, isn't there?" She was right, of course. My secrecy had been about more than professional requirements or family dynamics. "I was afraid," I admitted. "Afraid that having money would change how you saw me, how you related to me. I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I can provide." "But money is part of who you are," Melissa pointed out. "Your success, your generosity, your ability to make a difference. Those aren't separate from your identity. They're expressions of it." Kevin joined our conversation, having overheard the last exchange. "Rebecca, I want to say something about what happened this week." I braced myself for continued criticism about my deception. When I thought Tyler might have cancer, when I was researching treatment costs and insurance limitations, I felt helpless in a way I've never experienced. The idea that my child's health might depend on my financial resources was terrifying. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Learning that you could eliminate that variable, that money wouldn't determine Tyler's treatment options, gave me a kind of peace that I can't adequately describe. Yes, I'm frustrated about the secrecy, but I'm also profoundly grateful that you have the resources and the willingness to support our family." "You're my family," I said simply. "Tyler's well-being is as important to me as it is to you." "I know that now," Kevin replied. "And I'm sorry it took a medical scare for me to understand how much you care about us." Tyler bounded over to join our adult conversation. Are we going to celebrate? Dr. Chen said I'm going to be fine, and Mom promised we could get ice cream if the news was good. Ice cream sounds perfect, I agreed. And Tyler, I want you to know that the new hospital wing we saw in the posters, it's going to help lots of other children who aren't as lucky as you. Because they have real cancer? Tyler asked with the directness that children bring to complex topics. Because they have serious illnesses that require long treatments, I confirmed. The new building will make those treatments easier for kids and their families. That's nice of you, Aunt Becca, Tyler said, then immediately shifted focus to more pressing concerns. Can I get chocolate ice cream with sprinkles? As we drove separately to Tyler's favorite ice cream shop, I reflected on the dramatic transformation of the past week. What had begun as a potential medical crisis had evolved into a family reckoning with secrets, assumptions, and the complex dynamics of love and money. At the ice cream shop, Tyler regaled us with detailed plans for how he would spend his newfound energy once the iron supplements took effect. He wanted to try out for Little League, learn to skateboard, and convince his parents to get a dog. All normal 8-year-old aspirations that seemed precious after our brush with more serious possibilities. Rebecca, Melissa said as we watched Tyler attempt to eat a towering sundae without getting ice cream in his hair, I have a confession. What's that? Part of me is disappointed that we won't get to see the new hospital wing as patients. It sounds amazing, I laughed, understanding exactly what she meant. It will be amazing, and hopefully, Tyler will only ever see it during volunteer visits or fundraising events. Volunteer visits? Kevin asked. I'm hoping our whole family might get involved with the wing's community programs once it opens. Tyler could read to younger, patients, help with recreational activities, that sort of thing. I'd like that, Tyler said, looking up from his ice cream with a chocolate mustache. I could show them how to build really cool Lego spaceships. As we prepared to leave the ice cream shop, Melissa pulled me aside one final time. Rebecca, I want you to know that I understand now why you kept your success private, but I also want you to know that you don't have to hide who you are from us anymore. Thank you, I said, meaning it completely. And one more thing, she added, with a smile that reminded me of the sister I had grown up with, before adult complications created distance between us. What's that? Next time you want to make a $25 million donation, maybe give us a heads up? I'd like to plan my shocked reactions in advance. Driving home through Phoenix in the late afternoon sunshine, I thought about the strange journey that had brought our family to this point. Tyler's false alarm had forced secrets into the open, confronted assumptions, and ultimately strengthened relationships that had been strained by misunderstanding. The Rebecca Martinez Pediatric Cancer Wing would still serve other families, other children who weren't as fortunate as Tyler. But now it carried additional meaning as the catalyst that transformed my own family's understanding of success, generosity, and the various ways that love manifests in practical action. Sometimes I realized the most valuable gifts we give aren't the ones that make headlines or get our names on buildings. Sometimes there's simply the courage to be honest about who we are and what we're capable of providing for the people we care about most. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now, and hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.